I am trying to find a way to explain something complicated. And I think I'm going to screw it up on the way. But I think the only way to get the idea across is to just start talking and try to explain it, as though someone was sitting here. I mean, maybe I should do one of these again sometime with someone actually here. I'm trying to explain it to them. But in the meantime, I want to make sure I capture these thoughts. So we are apes. You know, um, I don't just mean that from an evolutionary standpoint. I mean, literally, we are apes. We are a member of the great ape family. Now, there's a bunch of baggage that goes along with being an ape. There's instinctual behaviors, you know, uh, those things that drive all of life. We aren't the end of a process. Evolution wasn't intended to bring us to this point. This is just where we ended up. And, there's all sorts of reasons why we ended up that way, but a lot of it had to do with instinctual behaviors. So, genetic changes that cause a behavior change within the species. Back when maybe we looked more like fish, I don't want to say we are because that assumes, like we can't look at the animals around us and say that those are our ancestors. Those are cousins. We mutually evolved from this long flowing process. It's very easy to think of reality as a set of moments when in reality it's more of a ongoing process, a process of constant change, birth and death, mutation. um, it's this long ongoing process. um, but my point is that when we became what we are now, um, those things didn't go away. Those instinctual behaviors are still there. I think that a lot of these instinctual drives we can recognize as emotion. Love has been a big driving force for how we get here. I mean, we're mammals. Mammals, they're family oriented animals. We are family oriented animals. And that love is what allows us to come together. Um, Now, a few 100,000 years ago, I don't know the dates. There's a great book, Sapiens by Noah Yuval Harari. It's definitely worth a read, but um, it talks about this. So, I think it was a couple 100,000 years ago, we hit something called the cognitive revolution. Cognitive revolution is when humans, as a species, started, excuse me, started being able to behave in the world according to concepts. Or at least that's how I would phrase it. So, we started to believe in things that were not literally true, they're more metaphorically true. The some of the examples that he gives in *Sapiens* is he talks about things like government, borders, countries, nations. All of these things, they are legal fictions. You know, you can have a wall at a place in the dirt, and that certainly does exist. But the whole concept of the nation that it is protecting is purely conceptual. There's nothing really binding us together other than convention. And, we have a shared history. Uh, it seems less so these days, and that's a big problem, which is not the point of this conversation, though. So, we hit the cognitive revolution, and we started being able to believe in these things that are only conceptually true. And this has been a great opening factor to the species. So, normally with other species of apes, like chimpanzees, you get to a troop size of about 100 or so. And apparently, the thing that really binds the group together is things like gossip. So, there's a couple degrees of separation between the animals. They're not going to they at least know that, someone I trusts that one, and you're going to hear about that one behind their back, so we know what people are actually doing. Trust is key, because if we're going to think of ourselves as a group larger than an individual, or a group larger than a family, or a group larger than a town, you need to have a narrative that binds the people together. There needs to be something that tells the person that this is someone other than just, another random ape competing for resources. So it's that narrative. That narrative is what drives this whole thing forward. And a narrative like that is a per person individual thing. I have my motivations. You have your motivations. And how much our motivations are in line depends a lot about who we are as individuals, how we live our lives, how we view others. What we think about each other. That whole, again, going back to the troop size of 100 or so, smaller than, you have your circle of people that you really know and you could work with, and that, are part of your group. And then you have this narrative around, we are all Americans, or we're all Christians, or we're all Democrats, or we're all Republicans, or, an individual can choose the size of the group based upon the narrative that they're telling themselves, because that tells them who's the in-group and who's the out-group, and whoever is in the out-group, you can do whatever you want. Whatever you can get away with is fine. The problem with this is that when exploitation becomes commonplace, these narratives break down. So, we certainly do still have nationalist narratives, but, do the people sharing these nationalist narratives actually treat everyone within their nation as an ally, as a friend, as us? Or are we far more divided than that? Ben Sasse wrote a book. I forget the name of the book. I wasn't planning on talking about that. But Ben Sasse wrote a book about what is happening. I think the book actually might be called Them. It's talking about the alienation of people. And, what he was talking about was that we have an epidemic of loneliness in this country. And I believe it. I've been there. We can be surrounded by people and feel so alone. Sometimes it's worse. It's often worse when there's more people around. Because it's just, becomes alienating. All of these people, how many of them do I know and trust? It can be very easy to just have a narrative centered around self. It's different in a small town. In a small town, people know each other. And, and then there's how people behave. Small towns also, have other... I have a friend who grew up gay in Mississippi. And, when he came up here for college, he wasn't going back. So, as much as anyone feels alienated in the place that they live, they're going to want to leave. So, all these narratives around these, nationalist narratives that exclude Democrats and, exclude people of color and exclude LGBTQ people and exclude whoever. Just all of these exclusions. It's gonna be destructive. So, the only thing any of us have in our power is our own actions. And that's true for everyone. Some people have more power than others. Some people, are president or whatever. But all we can ever do is, do what is in our power. Sometimes it's just do your job. But, what is your motivation? Is it self? Is it family? Is it, the community? Hold on one second. So we have a bunch of individuals. So we have a nation of apes, 300 million of us. And if all of these apes shared a common narrative of nationalism, everyone is equal, everyone is free, everyone is everything, it's all us, then the country as a whole will do much better because we would be taking care of each other. And that's not because of top-down power, it is because of this shared narrative between the people. Because, as long as everyone around you is in your in-group, then, take care of everyone. On a bigger scale, so, the term cosmopolitan, it goes back to ancient Greek, probably a different word, but like the concept. And what the concept is treating the whole world as if it was in the in-group. It is treat the whole, everyone as a brother or a sister or family. Like the whole point is that if you treat everyone the way you would treat yourself, then we as a group will do better. Imagine you could picture all of the people and their views, because reality around us isn't just the facts, isn't just the the physical. We have a very materialistic view in our society, but reality also includes the perceptions of all the individuals. Because the guy coming down the street with a gun, whether or not he's a good guy with a gun or a bad guy with a gun, depends a lot on what his narrative is and the narratives of those around them. If it's just Billy out for his walk again, that's not a threat. But if it is, hey, why does that angry white man have a gun? That's a very different mindset. We have a lot of division in our country. We have a lot of reason for division in our country. We could try repairing that, but it would actually require us deciding that that's what we want to do. And it's hard to trust when so many people are untrustworthy, because the narrative that they're living out excludes you, because you voted for the wrong person, because you are the wrong color, because you're the wrong religion, because you disagree as to history. There's there's at least two different narratives about this country and how it was founded. Either an ideal of freedom or slavery and genocide. That's a big gap to overcome. And both things are true in a way, but we would need to be able to come to a common term in order to be able to understand. Now, this whole conceptual thing here, this whole idea that the motivations of the individual, you could bucket them. Like literally, you could say, okay, everyone who just cares about themselves, put them conceptually into this bucket over here. And, everyone who cares about their race, put them in this bucket. And everyone who cares about the nation, put them in this bucket. You can now take everyone who cares about everyone and put them in that bucket. If you're into tech, you can think of it in terms of labels. Rather than folders, you put labels on things, and now things can have multiple labels. It's basically like set theory in math, which interestingly certain religions do not like, and I think it's for this very reason. As long as there, a person can be more than one thing, it complicates things a lot. It makes it hard to control. But yeah, at the end of the day, if we can manage to make it so that everyone had the cosmopolitan view, everyone had the view that it's all of us, then everything would be wonderful. It would be, like heaven. But you're never going to achieve that. It's much easier to go the other direction. It's much easier to take it to hell. Because, once you, trust is hard to build, but it's easy to destroy. You can easily destroy any trust that exists. Rebuilding that takes time and effort. And a lack of control, So, this is how society has always worked. This whole narrative thing. And it's always an individual thing. And it's always, you can view the great leaders through time as someone who can sell a narrative that unifies. And that's the way it has always existed. Now, I just explained it in a particular way that is very common to, that is driven very much based on my understanding of reality as I have learned, and other people during different times have understood it in different ways, and someone later on will probably understand it far better than I do. In fact, plenty of people probably do. But let's say you were trying to describe this thing, because it's not exactly, it's kind of separate from the material world, right? You can kind of consider it a narrative world. The Word. You could call it the Word. It could work. There's other things you could call it, especially based on what you think of it at the time. And you could be thinking metaphorically instead of literally. So if we go back to ancient Greece, they had these gods. You had the god of war and the god of love and the god of this and the god of that. And you can think of this sort of system, this sort of, metaphors for real things. I'm probably not explaining that too well, but the idea is that, if you have a population, and I'm not a Greek expert at all, but like Sparta, my understanding of Sparta was, you can think of it very much as a society driven by war. You could say that they worshipped the god of war. And, I kind of see some of the Greek gods as that, this is this narrative that they've built of the god of war, literally. Or metaphorically, whatever. Now, you get into Christianity, and, there is this idea that, it's all one God. Well, you can take it literally, that, there's a whole group of people who think that literally there is one God. That's interesting. So in terms of what they tend to preach, it's more like God the Father, in which case it is basically creating an authority over us. Now, none of us would really know what that authority wants. So what it really does is gives a lot of power to the people who are leading, because now they are, representing God, this one ruler over us all. Now, if you think of it in a different way, though, if you take it back to, like a concept like God is really this, intersubjective experience, this shared reality that includes the views of individuals, the idea that there is only one God would mean that, everyone should think the same. Which, if everyone thought the same, then we would have no conflict. That sort of view would push for a lot of conformity. Now, the problem with forcing conformity is that, we tend to give a lot of leeway to the in-group. So, you don't recognize what the people within your group are actually doing to people that you consider outside the group. Or in some cases, you don't even, consider what it's doing to people inside your group. Like, if you think back to church abuse, allegations, that sort of thing. You know, people, some of the apes abuse other apes. So, you know, this intersubjective, this classifying of the individual narratives, you know, in my mind, it really demonstrates the importance of changing minds, the importance of, you know, what it is that drives people's thoughts on a daily basis. So, you know, if you think conceptually around, you know, what metaphorical gods are worshipped in our country, the god of power, the god of money, the god of sex, the god of self. I've met multiple people with god complexes. You know, at least one of them was literal, and I suspect some of the others were as well. You know, people see the value that they can provide if they set their mind to it and try. And then they think that they're special, you know, as opposed to everyone else being repressed. Because that's my experience. You know, I never realized how powerful I was. And I think that's true of all of us. But it depends on those narratives. It depends on what we're striving for. Because a small group of people trying to do what's best for everyone don't have power in a society driven by money, power, and sex. Changing minds is hard. Building trust is hard. Destroying trust is easy. We have built a future on propaganda. And then we blame each other that it's going badly. Come on down to Small Tech. Bye, guys.